Hello, I had a chat with a guy from the genealogy company to check on my daughter Emma's DNA test. I gave her the test as a little extra Christmas present and made sure they had the tracking numbers. After waiting for a bit, the representative told me the test was processed, but he couldn't give me any more details due to privacy rules. Even with these assurances, I was puzzled that the results didn't show up in my DNA document. Feeling impatient, I asked, "Sir, can you tell me why my daughter might not be in the DNA results?" With a slightly annoyed tone, he answered, "There are many reasons she might not show up, but I can't discuss this specific test with you." Then it hit me. The main reason she wasn't on my list was probably that she didn't belong there. I ended the call feeling confused. I remember hitting the red button to hang up, and tears started streaming down my face. After a few minutes, I found myself curled up on the living room couch. With only 15 minutes left on my lunch break, I decided to call my daughter, who was likely on her lunch break too since we were in the same time zone. Knowing she usually reads at her desk during lunch, I wasn't worried about bothering her. To my surprise, she picked up on the first ring. "Hi, Dad. How are you feeling?" she asked, sounding tired. "I want you to know I love and trust you completely, but I've been looking into the DNA test. I spoke to some genealogy experts, and they said the test was done about 2 weeks ago." I started. I heard her sigh heavily, followed by a tense silence that felt like it lasted forever. "I know, Dad. We need to talk, but now isn't the right time or place," she said urgently. "Call me tonight and make sure Mom isn't around." As I rushed back to work, my mind was a storm of thoughts and emotions, making it hard to concentrate on my job at the engineering firm. I had too many questions and a nagging feeling that my daughter might not be who I thought she was. Being someone who values analytical thinking, I knew the importance of prioritizing and solving problems step by step. My role as vice president of engineering at Johnson Electronics wasn't a fluke, but a testament to my skills. At that moment, I realized I needed to approach personal issues like a work project. With a clear plan and organized James Carter, the wise man who hired me straight out of Purdue University for his startup, taught me this mindset. Under his leadership, Carter Tech grew into a leading industry company, bringing great success to both of us. Working closely with James, I not only earned a good salary and benefits, but also had the privilege of collaborating with talented colleagues. When I got home that night, my beautiful and wonderful wife Lisa greeted me, along with our 3 amazing children. Over time, our kids grew up, moved out, and started their own families, making the house feel a bit empty. But we found new ways to spend time together and rekindle our connection as a couple. Thinking back to last month, I couldn't help but remember some odd incidents, like Sarah's unexpected call to my wife a few weeks ago. One Tuesday night, while we were watching TV in the living room, Lisa's phone rang, breaking our quiet evening. Before answering, she glanced at the screen, hinting that there was more to the call. The conversation lasted about 5 minutes, and Lisa mostly responded with short yes or no answers. When the call ended, I noticed tears in her eyes. Concerned, I asked how she was feeling, and she said Sarah's cat had health issues. She assured me it wasn't serious, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Lisa seemed uneasy around me. I found it odd that she was so concerned about Sarah's cat. It wasn't until Sarah got the test results that the truth came out. Lisa didn't know I had sent the test to Sarah, but at the time I didn't think much of it. Sarah was the only one of our 3 kids interested in genealogy, which is why I bought her the online testing kit. Over the years, I'd spent a lot of time researching our family history, and especially enjoyed the DNA analysis aspect. I figured Sarah would be thrilled to take the test, but when I got home, I tried to stay calm around Lisa, hiding my disappointment and frustration. I first met Lisa during our sophomore year at Purdue, though we didn't hit it off until our senior year. But once we connected, our bond became unbreakable. We got married a year after graduation 3 decades ago, and I still believe it was the best decision of my life. Even now, after 31 years, Lisa, at 54, still looks stunning. Despite raising 3 kids, she's active and has the figure of a woman in her 30s. My wife has always been a source of joy and laughter, and the thought of spending forever with her filled me with excitement. But today, everything changed. Around 8 p.m., I found an excuse to leave Lisa in the room and slipped out to the porch to secretly call Emma. As soon as she picked up, I could hear the pain in her voice as she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have told you sooner, but Mom wanted to talk to you first before I said anything." Please, don't worry. I'm not mad at you. Just take a deep breath. I reassured her gently. I'm not blaming you for anything, I said tenderly. You are as much a victim in this as I am, I added. I could hear her heavy breathing, knowing how upset she was. Sweetheart, I want you to understand that this won't change our relationship. I will always be your father, and you will always be my dear daughter. I tried to comfort her. I've always showered my children with love, and even now, after all these years, I have no intention of stopping, even if you don't want me to, I said. She broke down in tears, sobbing almost incoherently. I love you, Dad. I don't need anyone else but you. You are my everything, she said. I don't want to embarrass you, but you're the person I trust most when it comes to DNA information. Let's focus on that to avoid complications. Have you received any DNA match results recently? I asked. Yes, Dad, she replied with a sigh. It turns out Amanda Anderson is my biological half-sister, the daughter of Uncle George and Aunt Jenny, Emma said. Oh God, I said in sorrow. I'm so sorry, Dad, she whispered. It's not your fault, sweetheart. You never have to apologize to me. I gently assured her. This meant that George Anderson, known to my children as Uncle George and to others as Judge George Anderson, was Emma's biological father. This implied that my wife had an affair with her boss when she worked as a lawyer at Howe and Associates. This could have been about 25 years ago, since Emma is now 24. Lisa was then working as his administrator. Eventually, she left the firm and pursued a career as a state judge, moving to the state capital where her career flourished. Lisa decided not to have a romantic relationship with George, but remained at Howe and eventually became the office manager. Despite this, over years of working together, George and his wife Jenny developed a close friendship with Lisa. Their bond was so strong that our children began to call them uncle and aunt, and their children did the same for us. It even happened that when I was on a business trip, Lisa would take the kids and stay with George and Jenny for a few days at their lake house. The kids even mentioned a few times that Aunt Jenny would take them for a walk with her. Neither Uncle George nor Mom accompanied them, and I never questioned it. Damn. I must have been distracted because I heard Emma calling me. Dad! Dad! I apologized to her, saying that I had gotten lost in my thoughts. Thank you for your help, sweetheart. Say hello to Drew for me, I said. Emma stopped me, saying, Wait a minute, Dad. What are your plans? She logically asked, a question for which I didn't have a good answer. So I simply replied honestly, I don't know, sweetheart. She warned me. Well, try not to do anything stupid, Dad. A little craziness is fine, but please don't get into trouble. Up to that point, I had never considered the possibility of harming Lisa, but my promise to Emma was unshakable. I had vowed never to break a promise made to my children, so taking drastic action was not an option. My priority was to reassure Emma about our relationship and then figure out the identity of Lisa's accomplice. As for the third task, starting the divorce process would have to wait until I found a new lawyer before taking any further action. It was necessary to find someone not associated with Lisa's firm. I knew that soon I would have to face my wife, Lisa Walters. The atmosphere in the house was cold and tense when we were together. Lisa's constant chatter seemed to fill the air, like a noisy magpie, which was probably a reflection of her nervousness. She seemed to try to calm me, maybe hoping to soften the blow of the news she would have to give me. I felt a noticeable distance between us, as she seemed unwilling to start a conversation. A week later, I filed a request for legal assistance, and the first lawyer I met was visibly nervous when he discovered that my wife worked as an office manager at Howe. Moving on to the next lawyer on my list, a 20-year-old woman, I felt relieved to see her smile when I mentioned Lisa's position at Howe. I knew she was the right one for me, who would not be intimidated by the involvement of influential Howe lawyers in my wife's affairs. I shared limited information about the infidelity, starting with the shocking discovery that my youngest daughter was not biologically mine, and that her father was Judge Anderson. My lawyer's name was Marie Robinette. She was young and ambitious. I watched her closely, wondering if I should seek another lawyer. Everything should be fine, she assured me before we delved into the details of our financial situation. Since we both had stable jobs, pensions, and benefits, Marie suggested dividing common assets equally, keeping our pensions, and selling the house. Such an arrangement would benefit both, although I would have a slight advantage in the form of higher income and a better pension. Unless you plan to seek revenge for the infidelity, the child, or the disrespect, Marie quickly interjected. After a pause, She suggested that I might consider drastic measures to address the wrongs done to me. We will certainly seek justice, but I don't want to cause financial harm, I responded. What about the judge? Will he be held accountable? I asked. If so, that could complicate matters and might not be beneficial in the divorce process, Marie explained. Then the judge is my problem, and I will handle it my way, I replied firmly. I understand, Marie said. If you don't contest the divorce and divide everything equally with your wife, it will take about 6 months. However, if you decide to fight, the process could drag on for a year. I haven't scheduled any dates yet, so there's no rush, Marie said. Let's make sure we do everything right, I assured her. Everything was going according to plan. I had consulted the lawyer. Now, only the situation itself remained to be addressed. I held on for another week, waiting for Lisa to lose patience and confess everything herself. Until that moment, our Saturday night routine consisted of a date, watching a movie, and making love. But our intimate moments on Saturday nights always had a special meaning. It had been 2 weeks since our last date, and since then, we hadn't been intimate. After discovering the infidelity, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Interestingly, Lisa didn't even ask about it. It became clear that she understood, but at the same time, she was skilled at maintaining appearances. But this charade couldn't last forever. I decided to take her to dinner at an elegant French restaurant. As we enjoyed a bottle of wine and delicious desserts, I noticed a genuine happiness in her that I hadn't seen in weeks. When we got home, I carefully helped her remove her coat, led her to the kitchen table, pulled out a chair, and uttered those terrible words. We need to talk. Lisa gave a half smile when I served a drink for myself and offered her something from the bar, which she politely declined. I put down the glass, found her gaze, and she said, That was 100 years ago, Clark. George and I haven't shared a bed in almost 2 decades, Lisa immediately confessed. Can we consider this a mistake of the past and move on? She nervously asked. I was glad she didn't directly deny the DNA test results but tried to downplay them by saying it was a long time ago and now didn't matter. Something very typical of her. So, the last time you were together was about 20 years ago. I need to know when you started the affair, how often, and why it stopped. But first I want to make sure that Barry and Katie are also mine, I said. No, Clark. Barry and Katie are yours. I started the relationship with George only a year after Katie was born, Lisa quickly responded. Our relationship lasted about 3 years and ended when George decided to leave the firm in search of a higher position in the judicial system. After our breakup, George waited a year before taking his first court position to ensure his record was clean. Our physical relationship only resumed a couple of times at the lake house when Jenny took the kids for the day, unaware of our past. Eventually, George revealed the truth to Jenny, leading to a meeting where we both assured her that there would be no more intimacy between us, Lisa said. Why didn't you ever talk to me and try to discuss everything calmly? Am I just your backup plan? I asked. Lisa paused, rubbing her hands with her sleeves before confessing. I was afraid to tell you. I feared you would leave me, and I couldn't bear that thought. I loved you then, and I love you now, she said. It seems you loved George more than me. I was your backup plan, I said coldly. No, Clark. I love you with all my heart, Lisa insisted. No, you loved him with all your heart, I said sadly. You loved him so much that you allowed him to pursue his professional ambitions, leaving me as insurance. Although you might have felt some attachment to me, you knew full well about my unwavering devotion to you and our family, which you counted on after his departure, I firmly declared. Lisa avoided my gaze, acknowledging that she had revealed a painful truth. And what about Emma? I asked. I thought that, since both had similar facial features, brown hair, brown eyes, and fair skin, no one would suspect the true paternity of the child. I also thought you had no reason to doubt that the child was yours. But when it turned out that the child looked like me, I didn't expect any problems until you decided to do the DNA test. Honestly, until that moment, I wasn't aware of any possible discrepancies, Lisa said. So I'm to blame for the current situation? I asked. Don't you feel any guilt? I asked incredulously. George and I talked about this, but I assured him you wouldn't worry because you two were so similar. He probably didn't know anything either. I haven't heard from him in a long time, at least a couple of years since Emma and Drew's wedding, Lisa said. Regardless of opinions or beliefs, Emma is definitely mine. I'm on her birth certificate. I raised her, and my love for her is unwavering. George shouldn't even think otherwise. If he contacts you, let me know. Also, I will immediately arrange a DNA test for our other 2 children. I need this for my peace of mind. Although you insist they are mine, I can't trust you, I firmly said. Lisa seemed stunned by my sudden distrust. But what did she expect? It was evident that she was also worried about how our children would perceive her infidelity. No one wants to appear foolish in front of their own children. I said, "So how long were you together and where?" "We didn't plan it, Clark. It just happened," Lisa explained. "We spent a lot of time together at work, which eventually led to a close friendship that turned into something more. He had all those qualities I admired: kindness, attention, wit, humor, and passion. We connected on a deeper level, but because of our marital commitments, we kept our relationship secret, often meeting outside of home. We never crossed the line by meeting at home, as that would have been inappropriate," Lisa said. "But that didn't stop you from continuing the relationship at the lake house, even after it was supposed to have ended, while his wife took the kids," I said sarcastically. "Yes, we couldn't end the relationship," Lisa whispered. "But I promise you we haven't been intimate since then. Jenny knows everything and forgave both of us," Lisa said, shrinking. "Yes, you already told me. I don't think I can do the same," I whispered, my voice filled with emotion. "We recognize that we did wrong, Clark. But it's been 2 decades since then, and you wouldn't have endured the pain while all this was happening. Can't we go back to what we were a few weeks ago? You were my beloved husband, and I was your devoted wife," Lisa pleaded with a tone of desperation. "Please, Clark, nothing has to change," Lisa pleaded. But I knew that everything had already changed. I spent the last 3 weeks wondering what had gone wrong, how you could fall in love with another, and whether I could ever trust you again. I gave you my heart, and you used it when it was convenient for you. Our marriage wasn't supposed to be just a convenience, I told her. We wanted it to be a union of unwavering devotion and commitment. Lisa began to cry, and that sight had always hurt me. Usually I would rush to comfort her, but in this case, it was different. I went to the living room, turned on the TV, and she stayed at the kitchen table. That night, we slept in the same bed, but when we lay separately, the lack of our usual closeness was noticeable. I quickly moved to the other side of the bed as far as possible. When she tried to approach me, I tried not to let her touch me accidentally. Despite the shock and pain on her face, I remained impassive. On Sunday morning, Lisa prepared a delicious breakfast for us, but while we were eating, I brought up the topic of divorce. "It's been more than 2 decades since the affair, and I didn't even know. Everything is in the past. We must move on," Lisa practically shouted, astonished by the news of the divorce. "A mistake is still a mistake, no matter how much time has passed. You cheated on me, lied to me, betrayed me, and broke my trust," I shouted in response. "These issues don't just disappear." I left half of my food on the table and went out to mow the lawn. That was the last contact with Lisa until Wednesday afternoon, when she mentioned that Jenny Anderson would be joining us next weekend. Although I wasn't thrilled with that, Jenny was a close friend who was going through similar difficulties to mine, so I felt the need to meet her. Jenny arrived at 6 p.m. on Friday after a 2-hour trip from her home. George didn't accompany her. That night, Lisa prepared a stuffed steak with mashed potatoes, and I brought some bottles of Merlot to complement the meal. The conversation during dinner was pleasant and relaxed, and afterward, we moved to the living room with our wine glasses. I assumed that was where the real conversation would begin. Jenny began talking about the affair in a distant, almost clinical style, but as she delved deeper, her emotions surfaced, causing tears in both her and Lisa. Jenny said that George had confessed his infidelity to her, assuring her that it had ended many years ago and would not happen again. At first, she was devastated, but over time she realized that since the relationship had ended before she knew, she didn't feel the same initial pain. Understanding that Lisa wasn't after George's wealth, Jenny understood how the affair started. George's charismatic personality was hard to resist. Jenny apologized for not knowing about Emma until recently when her husband's infidelity became public. Jenny never thought about the casual meetings between Lisa and George that took place after the main events of the relationship at the Andersons' lake house. I wondered if they shared details with her. I didn't ask the question, but I couldn't help but think that George must have been a skillful lawyer, given that Jenny seemed to justify his infidelity instead of being angry with him. Unlike Jenny, I couldn't be as forgiving about Lisa and George's relationship, even if it ended 2 decades ago. While Jenny seemed satisfied and captivated by Lisa's persuasive speeches, I couldn't force myself to ignore Lisa and George's actions. I can't help but imagine how my life would have been if I'd left him and how it would have affected me and the girls, Jenny reflected. Thinking about separating from your husband requires careful consideration of whether your life will improve or worsen without him, Jenny added sadly. After hearing Jenny's perspective, I realized that my life would probably worsen without my wife. This, of course, is a reason for reflection, but my situation is different from yours in the sense that I discovered the infidelity by accident. I wasn't told. That complicates the decision-making process, I said. Lisa was well aware that she was committing illicit acts and foresaw my reaction. She decided it would be best for everyone if I remained in the dark and lived in ignorance. This plan would have worked if not for the revelation that came out 20 years later. It turns out that the woman I loved the most in the world had a romantic relationship with another man before finally deciding to be with me. Lisa, am I right? I asked. My wife remained silent, not looking up. While Jenny told her story, Lisa sat quietly, glancing quickly in my direction to gauge my reaction. I knew her. I knew very well about her covert observations. To provoke Lisa, I kept a relaxed expression and listened to Jenny's story without giving the desired response. Both Lisa and Jenny were disappointed by my apathetic reaction, as evidenced by the sad exchange of glances between them. I shook my head in disappointment and went to the kitchen. Pouring myself another glass of wine, I returned to the living room and turned on the big screen, silently indicating that the discussion was over for the night. The women understood this and moved to the lounge to chat privately. When the show I was watching ended, I turned off the TV, looked into the lounge to wish them good night, and then went up to our bedroom. On Saturday, Jenny surprised me in the living room, insisting that we needed to talk. Not knowing where Lisa was, I agreed, and followed her to the lounge, where we settled into 2 chairs in the corner. Clark, I'm so sorry for your pain more than you think, but refusing to forgive Lisa and ending your marriage would be a huge mistake for both of you. Your love for each other must be the most important thing. The past is in the past, and spending the rest of your life apart over something that happened 2 decades ago would be a tragedy. If I could find the strength to forgive George, you can certainly do the same for Lisa. I understand your hesitations, Clark, Jenny said compassionately. As I said yesterday, I wasn't informed about the affair, but you were. Lisa decided to keep it from me because she knew it was wrong and feared I would never forgive her, I said. Why should I forgive her now? After 20 years of betrayal, she had a relationship for years and continued to deceive me. How can I ever trust her again? I said, shaking my head. I stood up and left the room, passing Lisa in the hallway. She knew what Jenny and I were talking about, and she could see from my expression that I wouldn't change my mind. Saturday night's dinner was filled with awkward silences. The women tried to start casual conversations, but I wasn't interested and barely said a word throughout dinner. Expressing my gratitude, I quickly took my coat and left, telling the women that I was heading to Malone's, my favorite spot, for a quiet drink. When I arrived at Malone's, I noticed Ronnie, the bar owner, talking with other customers in the corner. Instead of sitting at the bar as usual, I chose a table for myself, feeling utterly down and looking even worse. The waiter approached me with my usual Crown Black on the rocks and noted that it seemed like my dog had just died. Half joking, I smiled, admitting it seemed more like my marriage was falling apart. The waiter went over to Ronnie and whispered something in her ear. Ronnie stepped away from the customers and headed to the far end of the room, sitting across from me. Well, spill it, Superman, she said with a smile. Ronnie, a woman my age, was of Irish descent and had a bold personality with her freckles and fiery red hair. She didn't tolerate nonsense, but in the rare cases when someone crossed the line, her husband Moose was always ready to intervene and restore order. Moose, a former Marine sergeant, had an imposing presence and a muscular build. Although Malone's was usually a quiet place, the bar sometimes got lively. I witnessed an occasion when an aggressive man was disrespectful to Ronnie, and when she stood her ground, he continued provoking her. Moose quickly intervened and took down the troublemaker with a single punch. Moose held him down until the police arrived to restore order. Ronnie affectionately called me Superman due to my name, drawing parallels with Clark Kent. She joked that despite my kind nature and successful career, She would never want to see me angry. We shared many laughs about my playful nickname over the past 2 decades. I often visited Malone's, either with Lisa or alone, for food and drinks. Ronnie and Moose knew both Lisa and me, and Ronnie had a subtle gift for reading people, including me. She was like the sister I never had. Lisa and I have separated, I confessed. Until this moment, I had kept everything to myself. But finally, when I opened up, I felt liberated. I discovered that she was cheating on me with her boss for 4 years, and not once or twice, but continuously during that period over 20 years ago, I said. Emma is not my daughter, but the boss's child, and she thinks that since it was so long ago and I didn't know when it happened, I should just accept it and move on. She says she loves me, has always loved me, and doesn't want to divorce me, I said. That woman is a fool, Ronnie exclaimed. How dare she do this to you? You won't just accept this and let it go, will you? Ronnie asked. If Moose and I were in such a situation, he would have pushed me against the wall, and that guy's head would be next to mine, Ronnie said. I was glad to hear that Ronnie had the same perspective as me. I appreciated her rational and unbiased viewpoint, and if she hadn't agreed, I certainly would have reconsidered my position. Listen, Superman, it all comes down to respect, summarized Ronnie. I appreciate Lisa a lot, but her deceit was not dictated by love and respect. How could she allow you to believe that another man's child was yours for so long? Ronnie said, still indignant. I told Ronnie about the circumstances with Emma, admitting that Lisa herself didn't know Emma wasn't my daughter. But Ronnie pointed out that avoiding the paternity test was an easy way to avoid the truth. Did she apologize for her infidelity, or just for the pain it caused you? Ronnie asked. This woman knew how to avoid responsibility. I don't think she ever sincerely apologized for her infidelity, and I'm not sure she ever fully acknowledged the pain it caused me. It seemed her apologies were more for the fact that I found out about her actions, I said. Superman, I can't make decisions for you, but I think she has already shown you what you need to do. I'm very sorry, Clark. Moose and I will cover the drinks tonight, and you can take the rest of the bottle home. We'll make sure you get home safely at the end of the night, Ronnie said, patting me on the shoulder. Hand over the keys, demanded the taxi driver. I complied without questions. It was 2 a.m. when he drove me home. Lisa was waiting at the door to help me up the stairs to our bedroom. Exhausted, I fell into bed, still fully clothed. Lisa took off my shoes and socks and left me to sleep. On Wednesday night, my son called me at the office. He wanted to discuss Lisa's plan to involve the kids in convincing me not to proceed with the divorce. Although he didn't say it directly, it was clear that Lisa had devised this strategy. Even though we were usually in sync, I understood from our conversation that Lisa had made a great effort to persuade me. Dad, deciding to divorce Mom would be the dumbest decision since you wore a leisure suit in the 70s, said my son. He tried to lighten the situation with a joke. Seriously, Dad, ending a marriage over something she did more than 20 years ago, and that you only found out a few weeks ago? You confessed your love and said you would spend the rest of your life together, and now you're willing to leave everything and face the possibility of being alone for the rest of your days over a mistake? My son continued. Are you kidding, Barry? Let's call things by their name. What she did with him at the beginning might have been a mistake, but after a few months, it was already a serious decision, not a mistake, I said. How would you feel if you discovered your wife was cheating on you? You would probably lose your mind, right? But you never caught her. All this happened over 20 years ago, my son continued. The physical relationships might have ended, but the betrayal, the lack of respect, all of that continued, I responded coldly. Barry, I always thought you were smart enough not to intervene and take sides, but now you're caught up in your parents' drama. Why, Barry? I asked. After a minute of silence, I refused to give in. I was the one who had been wronged in this situation, and I was increasingly disappointed with you, son. I appreciated this woman a lot. I put her on a pedestal, idolized her, and she knew it perfectly well. She never intended to tell me the truth. If it weren't for an accident, I would have continued to adore her until death, only for her to use me as a backup plan when the man she really loved rejected her offer. Do I feel like a victim of manipulation? Absolutely, I said. Don't you think you're overreacting? My son asked. He was still talking when I abruptly ended the conversation. When I got home at 6 p.m., Lisa was already preparing a delicious dinner. Despite her efforts, she didn't seem pleased when I said I wasn't hungry. I poured myself a glass of Jack, turned on the TV, and settled into my favorite armchair. Lisa came in and asked what was bothering me. It was the same story. My wife cheated on me for 4 years with another man, had a child with him, and now my own children are against me, I said with frustration to Lisa. Call Katie and tell her not to contact me the next day if she doesn't want to face the same fate as Barry. Lisa walked away. After 31 years of marriage, she knew better than to provoke me over someone else. Why do you think the divorce won't be granted? Not only did you cheat on me for 4 years with another man and have a child with him, but you also replaced me in your heart with him. You can try to convince me that you are not in love with him and wouldn't have left me if he had asked to marry you. But the truth is that you can love me, but you are not in love with me, I shouted at Lisa. You have feelings for him, not for me. I'm just your backup plan because you always knew that my heart belonged to you and was willing to do anything to be with you. You betrayed me, cheated on me, disrespected me, and now you dare to try to manipulate our children against me. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, Lisa. But I refuse to feel anger towards you, especially towards Jenny, and I will not tarnish George's successful career as a good judge, I said with anger. I will file for irreconcilable differences, which will allow us to keep our pension accounts separate and divide the house and other assets equally, I said, calming down a bit. Lisa's tears flowed uncontrollably down her cheeks when she got up from her chair. In a fit of rage, I accused her of never expressing remorse for her infidelity. It seemed that she didn't regret it, which was at least honest in a way. All night I clung to the bottle of Jack. The next day, I contacted my lawyer and instructed her to prepare the divorce papers immediately. She informed me that I could review them on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, they would be ready to sign. Lisa would receive the papers on Thursday, so I asked her to bring her server to my house on Friday night. I hoped to be present during the delivery of the papers. After this, I contacted Judge George Anderson's office and informed his secretary about the urgency of the matter, asking him to call me as soon as possible. Judge Anderson returned my call immediately, fully understanding the reason for my request. His slightly worried tone during our conversation, which took place about 2 hours later, confirmed that the matter was really urgent. George understood the purpose of my call, but decided not to discuss it in his office. I agreed, and we arranged to meet at his house next Saturday at 10 a.m., not knowing that Lisa would not be present the previous night. I was sure she would find out before my arrival at his luxurious house. During dinner at Malone's restaurant on Saturday night, Lisa told me that Jenny had informed her about my upcoming meeting with George next Saturday. Lisa asked if she should join me on that trip. It's not just a casual conversation. George and I need to have a serious conversation, and you shouldn't participate in that, I said firmly. You must know that he is a respected appellate judge with an impeccable reputation, and he may be considered for a position on the Supreme Court. If you try to act against him as his husband, you could face legal consequences. Also, you promised not to do anything that could jeopardize his career, I coldly reminded her. Yes, I remember. You are choosing him over me once again. But don't worry, I will keep my word. I won't take any action that could jeopardize his place on the shortlist for Supreme Court judges. God forbid, the show must go on, I said. After dinner, I spent a few hours meeting with my lawyer and reviewing the divorce papers. I approved them. As I left, she asked what my intentions were regarding Judge George. Why do you care? I asked, winking at her playfully. Because I'm currently busy with several criminal cases, I think you will need the services of an experienced lawyer. Engineers like you don't usually show emotions, but your methodical and restrained nature scares me, Marie said. After giving me her business card, I left the office feeling uneasy. The next 3 days flew by as I immersed myself in a major project at work, allowing me to distract myself from my personal issues. My boss expressed his surprise that I hadn't lost focus amidst the chaos in my life. I confessed that I was grateful that at least something was going well. But before leaving on Friday night, I told him about Lisa's lawsuit and the impending conflict with George. I warned my boss that I might find myself in jail on Monday if the situation worsened. He assured me of his support, and if necessary, he would provide bail money. We shook hands and said goodbye. When I got home, the air was once again filled with the enticing aroma of Lisa's cooking. It seemed that lately, she was making more efforts to show me her numerous talents. I couldn't deny that she really was a talented cook. Even though I knew what was coming, I couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt. When we sat down to dinner, We ate in a relative silence that had become common in recent weeks. However, I didn't forget to express my gratitude for the delicious meal she had prepared. Anyway, I'm not an ungrateful person. I helped her clean the dishes, and just as we were about to relax in the living room watching TV, the doorbell rang. It was almost 7 o'clock. I immediately knew the visitor wasn't there for me and stayed in my place. Lisa smiled at me before going to open the door. On the threshold was a young man dressed formally, who asked if Lisa Walters lived there. Upon confirming her identity, he handed her a manila envelope, said the words, "You have been served," and quickly left. Lisa stood in the doorway, her shoulders slumped as if holding back tears. I led her inside, closed the front door, and guided her to the kitchen table. Despite my assurances, she looked clearly distressed, just as I had expected. We sat in silence, which seemed endless, although it only lasted about 5 minutes. Suddenly, she broke the silence, murmuring, "You are a horrible person," and then ran upstairs to our bedroom. I stayed where I was, knowing that the hardest part was already over. That night, in one of the rare occasions in our marriage, I slept alone in the bed, separated from Lisa. I went to the guest room, which we had prepared for visitors, trying to find rest in a strange and unfamiliar bed. Sleeping seemed like a distant comfort, especially after breaking up with the woman I once considered my soulmate. Despite the circumstances, we continued sleeping in the same bed, not wanting to take the first step towards separation. But now, I felt that everything was over. I got up early and moved stealthily around the room to collect my things without disturbing Lisa and increasing the tension. I didn't check if she was awake, but I silently took my clothes and left through the door. I dressed in my usual attire, a collared shirt, nice Levi's jeans, and custom-made cowboy boots with steel tips, made during our visit to my son in Dallas. I decided to leave a little earlier than necessary. I was trying to arrive on time to the meeting, not wanting to be late. Arriving early, I decided to spend the time at the nearest cafe. When I arrived at George and Jenny's house at 10 o'clock, I rang the doorbell. Jenny opened the door, looking nervous, but charming as always. When she hugged me, all I could say was, "I'm so sorry that everything ended this way." She didn't say anything, just took my hand and led me to a room where George had displayed his memorabilia and photographs. George was sitting in his usual chair, but he got up when we entered. "Hi, Clark," he greeted me. "Hi, George," I responded. Jenny looked visibly scared as she left the room. We were standing 6 feet apart from each other, our gazes fixed. There was a time when I considered this man almost like a brother. Our bond was that strong. George, 2 years older than me, was the same height, but in the last 2 decades, he had gained 30 extra pounds, most of which accumulated in his round belly. We trusted each other, shared our aspirations, and enjoyed various activities, such as fishing and hunting. We used to be close friends, and I always admired his successful career as a judge. But now, standing before me, his gaze was cold and calculating. All feelings of friendship had vanished, leaving room for a deep sense of betrayal and anger. This man, who not only stole my wife's love, but also became the father of her child, destroyed everything I held dear. At that moment, I only felt an uncontrollable rage. Maybe you have her heart, but you are just a miserable, soulless person. You can keep your impeccable reputation because I promised Lisa to keep this between us. And I always keep my promises to her, but you won't keep your manhood, I brutally said. Without hesitation, I made a move with my left foot, followed by a powerful kick with my right foot, aimed directly at his groin. George's reaction was slower than expected, allowing my boot to hit its target accurately. I felt a surge of satisfaction as his body tensed and my foot made contact with his sensitive area. A scream of pain filled the room, similar to the howl of a wounded animal. He collapsed on the floor, clutching his groin and emitting high-pitched screams of pain. At that moment, Jenny burst into the room, her eyes wide with shock upon seeing her husband writhing in pain on the floor. She ran to him, but his screams only increased and she felt helpless. At that moment, her terrified gaze met mine, not knowing what to do next. Quickly, I took my mobile phone from my pocket and dialed the emergency number, informing the operator about the incident at Judge George Anderson's house and requesting an ambulance. When I was about to leave, Jenny suddenly grabbed my right arm. Despite my initial instinct to react firmly, I was surprised to see the calm on her face, which replaced any signs of hysteria or anger. She hugged me tightly and in a low voice said, "Thank you. We understand what we must do." Returning the hug, I left the house, got into my car, and headed home, feeling confident that the authorities would not pursue me. Jenny understood the situation and would talk to her husband when he was in better shape. The return trip home brought a sense of relief, although also a sense of emptiness. For months, I had been immersed in emotional anguish, but when I finally discovered Lisa's betrayal, I felt as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Interestingly, once I knew the truth, its power over my heart weakened, and I was finally able to make rational decisions for myself. Perhaps it wasn't the best choice for everyone, but sometimes one must prioritize their own well-being. After all, that's what everyone else had done for the past 20 years. Why shouldn't I do the same? Yes, I understood that a part of me would always continue to love Lisa, but I refused to remain stuck in the past. It wasn't my fault or my decision. It was time to let go of the situation and move on. When I got home, I went down to the basement, picked up some suitcases, and headed to our room. Lisa watched me as I passed through the living room and entered the room. "Is that all?" she asked. "That's all," I confirmed. "We lived 31 years together, and everything has been wasted. It hurts to see how selfish you are, unable to recognize the deceit that robbed me of 24 years of love. It hurts, but I don't hate you. Even George, who might think otherwise, is not the object of my anger," I said. "In the future, I plan to reconnect with Barry and Katie. It is important that you reconcile with Emma as soon as possible because she's going through a difficult time. Lisa, please sign the papers so we can end this, or I will destroy you and that miserable man. In the coming days, I will collect the rest of my things. I think it's best that we don't talk anymore. If you have something to say, you can contact my lawyer through the business card that's on the kitchen table," I said. Lisa stayed there, visibly disturbed but silent. I collected my things, loaded them into the car, and left the house. 31 years had passed in the blink of an eye. I hoped George had lost his manhood, but it turned out he didn't. Thanks to extensive surgery and months of suffering, he managed to keep his virility. This surprising news reached me through Emma, whom Jenny had contacted in search of me. Jenny didn't know my phone number, and no family member was willing to share it with me. In fact, 8 months had passed and none of the family members had contacted me, but I accepted it. The official explanation was that Judge George had an accident in his office. He fell on his desk and then on the floor. Out of delicacy, the press called it a domestic accident, without mentioning that the injury occurred in the groin area. When Lisa refused to sign the divorce papers, I informed Marie that we would start taking action. A lawsuit was filed against George, and he received a lot of negative criticism in the media. This made it impossible for him to be considered for a position on the Supreme Court. Lisa became known as Judge Anderson's lover. The pair of lovers lost their positions and were shamed across the country. I obtained the divorce and a substantial compensation from George. My children were desperate to see how I punished the traitors. The house would soon be auctioned. Lisa hadn't tried to contact me since everyone found out about her and George. Barry and Katie had not yet come to light. It seemed that I would not be included in the family's Christmas dinner plans. My boss was passing the company to me starting next year, as he was retiring. According to the contract, I was to run the company for 7 years, after which I could retire comfortably with a generous severance package. After that, he would look for a buyer for the company, and I would also receive 10% of that transaction. After living in marriage for what seemed like an eternity, I finally decided to dive back into the dating world. It took me a while to remember how to navigate the dating world, but the news of my divorce spread like wildfire. Before I knew it, our divorced friends began approaching me, interested in my new life. Even some of Lisa's friends, who had also gone through divorces, started calling me, surprised that she had let me go. I must admit, the attention boosted my ego in a pleasant way. I was being presented with exciting opportunities both in my professional and personal life. In my free time, I actively sought out new hobbies to engage in outside of my personal commitments. One hobby I recently decided to step back from was genealogy, which I once found deeply intriguing. However, I still maintained a casual interest in genealogy and occasionally browsed forums and articles related to it. It was during one of these casual perusals that I stumbled upon an intriguing post about a family with a convoluted history eerily similar to my own. The post described an affair, an illegitimate child, and the ensuing turmoil that seemed to echo the events of my life. This discovery reignited my passion for genealogy, but now with a renewed focus on uncovering the secrets of the past, not just within my family, but as a broader research interest. One day, while I was engrossed in reading another genealogy forum, I received a call from Marie, my lawyer. She had some updates regarding the divorce proceedings and the lawsuit against George. I braced myself for more complications, but instead, she had surprisingly positive news. "Clark, I have some good news," Marie said. "Lisa has finally agreed to sign the divorce papers. She realized that prolonging this process wasn't benefiting anyone, especially herself. Additionally, we've reached a settlement with George. He's agreed to a substantial financial compensation that will be paid out over the next few years. This should cover your expenses and provide a comfortable cushion for you." Relief washed over me. "That's great to hear, Marie. Thank you for handling everything so efficiently." "Of course, Clark. There's one more thing. Lisa wants to have a final conversation with you. She insists it's important. Do you feel up to it?" I hesitated. Despite everything, the thought of facing Lisa again was daunting, but perhaps it was necessary to finally close this chapter of my life. "Yes, I think it's time." We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a small cafe we used to frequent years ago. As I walked in, I saw Lisa sitting at a corner table, looking pensive and somewhat older than I remembered. The years of stress and recent events had clearly taken a toll on her. "Hello, Lisa," I greeted her as I sat down. "Hello, Clark," she replied, her voice soft and trembling slightly. "Thank you for coming." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us gathering our thoughts. Finally, Lisa spoke. "Clark, I wanted to apologize once more. I know words can't undo the past, but I need you to understand that I am truly sorry for everything. I was scared and made terrible choices. I've lived with that guilt every day." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "Lisa, I believe you, but the damage is done, and we both need to move forward. I appreciate your apology, and I hope you find peace." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I hope you find happiness, Clark. You deserve it." We talked a bit more, reminiscing about the good times and acknowledging the pain. It was a bittersweet conversation, but it brought a sense of closure. As we parted ways, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The future, once clouded by uncertainty and betrayal, now seemed clearer and more hopeful. As the months passed, I settled into my new life. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and even started dating again. My relationship with Barry and Katie gradually improved, and Emma and I grew even closer, bonding over our shared love of genealogy. Professionally, things were better than ever. With the company thriving under my leadership, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My boss's retirement was smooth, and I found myself enjoying the challenges and rewards of running the business. One evening, as I was organizing some old documents, I stumbled upon a letter from James Carter, my mentor from Purdue. He had passed away a few years ago, but his wisdom and guidance continued to inspire me. In the letter he had written, "Clark, life will throw challenges your way, but remember, it's how you respond that defines you. Stay true to your values and you'll find your path." Reflecting on those words, I realized how far I had come. Despite the hardships, I had managed to navigate through them with resilience and integrity. And for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. Years later, I retired from my position at Johnson Electronics, leaving the company in capable hands. I moved to a small town near the coast where I bought a charming house with a view of the ocean. It was a peaceful place, perfect for reflecting on the past and enjoying the present. One sunny afternoon, while walking along the beach, I saw a familiar face approaching. It was Ronnie, the bar owner from Malone's. She had also retired and moved to the same town. We laughed and caught up on old times, and it felt like no time had passed. As we sat on a bench, watching the waves crash against the shore, Ronnie turned to me and said, "Superman, you've come a long way. I'm proud of you." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "Thanks, Ronnie. It hasn't been easy, but I've learned that even in the darkest times, there's always hope." And so, life went on. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined me. I had found new purpose, new love, and a new beginning. And for that, I was grateful. The end. Bye-bye.